name's Kanina Terry, and I'm born and raised in Sulakaut, and I'm a member of Obishakokong First Nation, that's Lac-Seul First Nation, which is very close to Sulakaut. I started 2 years ago, and I took a course in Thunder Bay offered by a woman who lives and works there, and she's a lot taught herself how to do work on deer hides, and she offered a course in Thunder Bay one summer or 2 summers ago to process a deer hide, and it's something I've always wanted to know and know how to do. I really value and admire the work that goes into working on hides, and I think the product that you get from it is superior to what you get from commercially tanned hides. I use hides some in the craft work that I do, but I don't make much. Like, I don't make mittens or moccasins really, but it's something I've always wanted to know how to do, and I really love the smell of the hides. It's a beautiful, beautiful smell, and the texture's different. So when Julia offered this course in Thunder Bay, I took the opportunity right away. I went down for 5 days with my son, and we spent 4 days tanning a deer hide, and we took that home with us at the end of it. It was a really beautiful time. And since then, I've been doing it on my own, and we've had Julia come up to Thunder Bay last summer, and she taught a course, and that was attended by people from Sulakaut, and even someone from Port Francis and Fort William First Nation came. And I think hide tanning is a skill that people are wanting to learn more about. And I've traveled the communities north of Sulakaut, and I don't see many people doing hide work right now. Where I know, 20 years ago, a generation ago, there would have been a lot of people working on hides. And I don't see that happening so much anymore. And I ask the communities I travel to, and they'll say, "Oh yeah, I used to see my mom doing that, or my grandma would do that." But unfortunately, I don't see many people doing it right now, and that's something I'd like to help contribute to change, because I think a lot of people are wanting to see that change. And I'm also really active on social media, and I follow a lot of people right now, mostly younger Indigenous women who are working on hides, and it's a really amazing thing that I see happening. So I learn a lot through them, and I get a lot inspired by them. And so I learned how to tan deer hides, and right now I'm just kind of teaching myself how to tan moose hides, and getting knowledge from other people too. I haven't tanned a moose hide full yet, like to completion. So this is something I want to say that I'm still really learning. This is I'm trying techniques that I've heard about, and it's really different from deer, because the deer hide is so thin. You can really do it in a matter of days, but a moose hide, I think, is something that you need a lot more time and power. Like, the way I think our ancestors used to do it is that it was a camp experience where numerous people were getting together and working on a hide, and that's how I see it sometimes happen now, where people are planning hide camps now, and it's a 12-day event, and they get together and they just work every day on hides. So I feel sometimes pretty lonely when I'm here by myself, and I do have a few friends that will work with me, but not to the extent where it's just a whole group of people. So the hide I'm working on today is a quarter of a moose hide that my brother killed a few weeks ago, and we quartered it in the bush, and we brought it here to my parents' place where I live, and we hung it in the woodshed for a day, and then I skinned the moose hide off when it was hanging, and I did that in an afternoon, and then I stored it until now, and you can see it's winter now, and the hide is frozen, so it's a little bit stiff here and there, And I didn't do anything after I skinned it. I just put it in the bin and I stacked the 4 pieces together. This hide I don't want to try to tan because it's a bull hide. It's a bull moose, and I've heard that that bull moose skin is just really thick, and I think we really wouldn't have used. What I've heard is that we wouldn't have used bull moose for buckskin, because that's what you want, is you want buckskin eventually, just because the amount of work that goes into it. And it might be better used for snowshoe lashings or drums, for like the cover for a big drum or a hand drum or rattles. And then for that you just need to make it into rawhide. So that's kind of what I'm hoping to do with this, is just to finish it and get it down so the hair is off, the grain is off, and then the membrane and fat and muscle is off, and it's hopefully a uniform thickness. So that's the first time that I'm working. This is the first time that I'm working on a hide with, that's my goal, where I know I'm not going to be tanning it. And when I found that out about bull hides, I thought, okay, that takes a lot of, it felt like a little bit of relief of pressure on me, because I've been getting bull hides and thinking, okay, I have to tan these. But when I think of it, and I think about our ancestors and how we would have survived, of course we wouldn't be putting that effort into something that was just so hard to work with, and using it for things that it would be better suited for. So I'm looking forward to working on this one and just making it into rawhide. What I did today is I put it in some hot water just to separate it from the other pieces that it was frozen with, and then to help thaw it so it's a bit more pliable. And it's actually still quite frozen here and there. And I'm shaving off the moose hair with a knife. And this is a technique I've only done once before, where I shave it on a post. And my dad has spent quite a bit of time working with people and seeing how they do it, and that's what he said he's seen the elders from around here do. Another one, there's a hide behind me there. I put that on a frame with the hair still on, and I shaved that hair off with an X-Acto blade. But this one, I've heard that the Dene hide tanners, and there's actually still a lot of Dene hide tanners in northern Canada and northwestern Canada. And so I follow them and I creep what they're doing. So that's what I've heard that they do, is they put it onto posts and just shave it. And I think their technique is really good, where I'm still learning and trying to get the hang of this. After this, when I'm done shaving it, I'm going to put it on a frame, just a rectangular frame, and stretch it out so it's tight. And then I'm going to take the, you can see all this stuff off. I'm going to take all of this off with a tool, and actually I'm going to try cutting it. A fellow in town works on moose hides, and he was showing me how he uses an X-Acto knife and cuts it off. So I'm going to try that, and if that doesn't work, I'll use a tool to pound it off. And then I'll turn it around and use a kind of beveled edge and scrape this off, and by then it will be frozen, and you'll be able to get the hair and the grain off. So we don't want to just get the hair off, we want to get also a thin layer of I think of it as like the top layer of our skin. It's that shiny layer. We want to get that off. And if we don't get that off, well, in tanning anyhow, if you don't get that off, your tanning solution, which is usually brains, won't penetrate. But I'm thinking with rawhide, you still want to get that off, because it's just going to be too thick otherwise. This is the hair that would be good for tufting, I think. It's really nice thick white hair, and then it would probably take color really well. I had an older cousin of mine who always would come around and spend time with us. She spent time with us in the summers, and she was always bringing up her beads. So she was a big influence in my life. But I also, I think I identified quite young that there was a big lack of knowledge, a big lack of stuff that I wasn't being taught. And I'd see other people learning things, but it wasn't something that I was really being exposed to. And it was stuff that I was interested in. I'm thinking about beadwork, and then as with the beadwork, you know, to see moccasins and mitts and hats, and thinking and seeing the hide that goes into it, also appreciating those, and wanting to learn more about them. And I think I recognized that a lot of the reasons why I wasn't learning those things and I wasn't taught those things from a young age at home is because, one, well, my grandmother died quite young, and then my showmiss died before I was born, just a year before I was born. So I didn't have those people in my life. But then also my mother went to residential school when she was 3 years old, so she really didn't have those people in her lives for a majority of her life until they passed. She was removed from the environment where she would have learned a lot of those skills, and they would have been passed down to her. So as a result of that, she didn't have that knowledge to pass on to me. So that's something I feel like a lot of the work I'm doing right now is learning skills that I would have been taught if it hadn't been for residential school. They would have been passed on to me. I've recently found out that my Goka, my grandmother, was a really excellent cook and cooking traditional foods. You know, looking at a moose and knowing what to use use different parts for. I heard she made really excellent meat pemmican, and I think meat pemmican is something that people aren't really. It's one of those things where not a lot of people are making. Well, I don't hear about it. I don't know. I'm sure that people are, but I just don't hear about it very often. And that was something I'd never known about her. And cooking is something I've been doing kind of as a profession, and working around food and food security and food knowledge and food teachings has been something I've been working on as well. I think since I became a mother, I've been more and more looking at those things. And it's important to me that I raise my son in a way where he's learning those and he's experiencing and being introduced to those things and having a chance to learn them. I did this to a bull hide last fall, and it was an older bull, and he was covered in scars, like so many, and big gashes, like inches long. It was neat. I really enjoy taking the muscle and fat off, because it kind of comes off in this nice layer, and that's just kind of satisfying when it all comes off at one. But that's more the deer hides. Like the moose might not work that easy, because the moose has a really thick membrane, and the deer hide, it's just kind of thin, and you don't need to spend that much time working on it. Yeah, so aside from that, I really enjoy the physicality of it. Like, you're working, it's hard work, but it also is it's satisfying to do. Someone that I follow on Instagram asked that question, and she does a lot. She actually goes and gets hired to go to hide camps all over Canada, and all the people like me. There's me. I really like flushing, and everyone else is like, I love the community when we're all working together. But that's how other people do it. It's all groups. It sounds really beautiful. So I'm going to experience that one day. No, I find it's mostly women. Majority women. I know very few men that are doing hide work. There's a few guys that are doing it, but the people that are wanting to learn, like those are guys that are already doing it, have been doing it for years. But the people that I find that are wanting to learn are women. And I think traditionally it would have been women doing hide work, because I think the men would be, I don't know if it would just be men going out hunting, but it would, probably in most cases, the men would be hunting, and then they'd come back with the hide, and the woman would just start working on it. And I think the women, because we're traditionally, or mostly the ones that use the hide, they're interested in the product, in the finished product of the hide, because they're the ones that are going to use it. And I think too, up in our area north of here, it was women that were working on hides. So the next thing I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be piercing holes around the edge of the hide to string it up onto a frame there. I don't want it to freeze too much while I do this, so I might be putting it in the water as I go. I find it's always easier with a knife to have a board underneath to apply some pressure on. Maybe 1.5 inch wide slits along the edge here, maybe 4 or 5 inches apart. And that's where the lacings will go to string it onto the frame. This we call the membrane. Well, I don't know who calls it. I've been taught that it's called the membrane side. The flesh side is where it has all this fat and a membrane that kind of holds all the fat and stuff to the hide, I think. So you want to get all of the pieces off down to, you want to get down just to the hide. Well, especially for making rawhide, you want to get it off because you want it to be smooth. With rawhide, I think the goal is to have both of the sides being quite smooth. So you want to get that down. Let's see if this works. This is another technique taught to me by a tanner, or another tanner in town. I don't know if that will work. So what he does is he takes the X-Acto blade and curves it. And actually I have a small one, so what he uses is a bigger one. And he cuts all the fat and the flesh off in these really nice, nice strips. Yeah, when I saw him do it, I just thought this is really genius. So you can see here, these are some veins, and you want to get down, you want to get all the red veins down, so it just looks, it just starts to kind of look like hide. But you can get down, and I think as long as you have the veins exposed and you can see them, they look like rivers, that would be a good depth to get down to. I think I'm going to work on the edge a bit because I'm a little scared to do that. This is still something I'm trying out. The other technique that I've seen done for fleshing is using a kind of like a chisel, but traditionally we would have been using I think the front leg bone of a moose and making a angled tool out of it like this that we jab. And I just found this chisel at Home Hardware, and it works really well. So I'm going to try that over here. And the goal right now that what I'd like to do today is to get all of this membrane, or all of the fat and the flesh off anyways, and then work on getting the membrane scraped off. But if it freezes anymore, I might start be able to use my scrapers, and that will work too. So I haven't ever tried this before, where I've done this on a frame as it's freezing. I think when I did a hide last winter and I stretched, I think I waited until everything froze, or I had already fleshed it some. With this, I'm actually just able to cut it off, and I'll still need to scrape more because there's still membrane. You can still see the veins, but at least in this way I can get the big chunk of muscle off, and where it just, when it freezes, I'll be able to scrape that thin layer of membrane off. Hello there. We're back at this moose hide that I put on the frame the other day, and I let it freeze overnight, and I've sat it out for a few days now, and it's still it's nice and cold, so it's still frozen. You can hear it's kind of hard, and over here where I've already scraped, it's a little bit softer. So this morning I spent scraping this side. I had cut away the membrane on this side here, and so it was a little easier to scrape. And here, all this stuff here is all of the moose membrane and different layers of different stages of removal here. So I'm going to be working on this using a number of scraping tools. So this is what I had made, and we're just scraping down like this. And here I've already scraped off the membrane, but I'm just trying to smooth it out. So I'm just going to try to work down in strips here. See how easy that was. That's because the membrane has been scraped off, and now we're getting to parts where it hasn't been. I need a bit more muscle. And you can see it coming off on the tool there. So I scraped off this part, and you can see the veins, so I think that's where we want to get down to. And we could probably even go a little bit thinner. Because I'm going to be using this for rawhide, I think it's okay if it's still a little bit thicker. But we'll see when I get the hair off, how much, if I want to thin it out much more. Because there might be spots where the legs are that are thinner than the back. So that we'll see how, if I need to scrape much more after this. The people that have shared their knowledge with me about working on moose hides, here a lot of people in the north of Ontario like to do this method of dry scraping out in the winter in the cold weather. I think today it's about -14, -12, so things are still really cold. When we get any warmer than that, I think the hide starts to thaw and dry out. We really want to keep I think the moisture that's in the hide, we want that to be frozen, and that's what makes it easier to scrape off. And when that evaporates, it becomes more of like a dry scrape, or whatever. I've heard people call it like I forget what it's been called. But it's a bit harder to work the hide. It's easier to work when there's still moisture frozen in the hide. So this is the hide that I started a while back, and I had finished scraping and cleaning up the membrane, the flesh side, and today I'm going to finish scraping the hair off and the grain off so we can have rawhide from it. I started on it a bit last night. It's really nice and cold right now. It's like I think -20 or something, so this is frozen. So I'm just going to start scraping. I find I've been using a couple different tools as I go for them, or go through it, but it's all working. So with that big tool, I just mostly shaved off the rest of the hair, and then with the smaller tools I'm using to get down and get off the little hair bits. And I'm also getting off the grain, which is I think the epidermis layer, which is really crucial to do when you're making buckskin. Even though I'm not making buckskin for this, I think it's still important to do to get it off. So you've you've seen what I've been doing for scraping. I've been kind of doing it in two parts, scraping off the longer hair that was still on, and then scraping off the grain and or the epidermis. And I'm going to continue doing that for the rest of this piece here, and then I'm going to go over and really try to get at some of these spots where there's still little bits of hair in there, and just they might need a little bit more scraping. And as this is the back of the moose where the hide is the thickest, I might try to shave it down a little bit so it's more uniform in thickness, say this piece. I'm not going to try to get it down to the belly thickness because it's quite thin there. I think if I could get it all, the top piece kind of the same thickness as the middle side piece, I'd be happy with that. And then I think that's what you do for making rawhide. This is my first time doing this with the idea of making rawhide. I'm probably going to wet it again before, I'm going to pour water over this before I go to scrape off these parts. And what I can do is then take it off and cut off the outside, or the where I've laced it up, the holes where I've laced it up where there's still hair and muscle, and then it can be stored, rolled up and stored for however long. It can be used, I think, for drums, maybe hand drums, or maybe even a small big drum, or rattles. We also use for lashings for snowshoes, things like that. So there's lots of uses for a piece of rawhide that hasn't been tanned. Thank you.